In this Golf Smart Insight, we're going to take a look at the movements of the forearms. So, there are a number of different movements that are possible with the forearms, right? First one we've got is flexion and extension. Those are opposites. Then we've got ulnar deviation and radial deviation. So this is ulnar, this is radial, or this is abduction, this is adduction. Then we've got supination and pronation. So supination is when the palm faces up, pronation is when the palm faces down. Those are the basic movements of the forearm and wrist. Well, just like 3D has helped us to understand the movements of the spine, I think 3D can help you understand the movements of the forearms, and that's what we're going to talk about in this video. Now, it's important to understand that your body is not just a series of levers. Your bodies are joints and muscles and things that create these appearances of levers. So the understanding of how the spine and the hips and the body moves in the backswing has changed a lot, right? They used to teach that you're going to get in this posture and you're just going to rotate around your spine. Well, now we explain that, okay, some people need to feel like they give more of a side bending movement, because to make a good pivot in a backswing is actually going to be a blend of some rotation, some side bend, and a little bit of extension. Well, I think the same thing can be applied to the forearm. So let's take a look at the movements of the forearms and where the muscles are that help those movements take place. So first, let's look at two of the big ones, which is flexion and extension. Now what I want you to do is take your hand and place it on your elbow, just like so. So you got one on kind of the soft fleshy part and one on the backside like so. So now if you were to flex, you will feel most of the activity happening right down here on the inside of your forearm. If you were to then extend, you would feel that this side's relaxed and all the motion is happening on this side of your forearm, or the outside of your forearm. Now, it's important to understand that if I was to lay my forearm like so and draw a line down the middle, most of the flexors, they're all connecting on the inside of my elbow, and they're kind of coming across just like so. Right? Now, if I had this facing the other way and I was to extend, they all connect on the outside part of my elbow, and they'll be coming more from the thumb side kind of across like this. So what ends up happening is when you flex your wrist like so, some of the same muscles and the muscles on the right side are also going to be responsible for some ulnar deviation. The opposite is true, that when I go to extend my wrist, I'm going to use these muscles here, and because most of them connect up by the thumb side, they're going to encourage some radial deviation. So it's important to understand that these two movements are a little bit coupled. You've got extension and radial deviation, you've got flexion and ulnar deviation. So how does this work, or how can you experiment with that? If you were to radial deviate, or bring your thumb up like you're hinging a hammer, and then you were to extend, you'd feel that that feels pretty comfortable. And you can see that the space between my hands didn't really change. So now I want you to radial deviate, or bring that thumb up, and then I want you to try and flex, and you'll feel that you get to a point where it's just not going to want to stay there, and it's going to drift towards neutral. Okay, the same thing can happen if you were to ulnar deviate. So now we've got kind of the difference right here. So we've ulnar deviated, and now if you flex, that stays pretty much the same, feels pretty comfortable. If you stay there and you try to extend, holy cow, that starts to get hard and it makes it want to come back up. It's very hard to get any amount of real extension while staying in that ulnar deviated position. So I think you can see where this is starting to go when we apply it to the golf swing. When you try to maintain extension of the trail wrist, it's important to understand that that will also tend to maintain radial deviation. If you are being told that we want to try to keep the extension of the wrist, but you're gonna ulnar deviate or unhinge this way, that's really hard for the body to do. It looks cool, you know, I can understand how if you were just looking at the levers, how that would position the club a little bit more from the inside, and that can make sense, but it doesn't hold water when you look at the actual body movements that are going to happen. So let's take a look at kind of the critical phase. If we look through impact, what's going to be happening? So we know that we want those wrists to kind of be extending away from us, right? They're going to be going like this. So this left wrist is going to be going into ulnar deviation for sure. The right wrist is going to be approaching ulnar deviation, which is part of the reason why you will lose some of the flexion in your right wrist when you get into that final release phase. Now, the important thing with the left wrist is as it loses some of its flexion, it's going to want to drift more and more towards neutral. So if you want to get those arms to extend like so, you're going to have to maintain some of the flexion, or at least neutral, but you're not going to be able to let that left wrist cup through impact. So what we see a lot is amateurs tend to cup that wrist through impact. That activates some of these flexors, and now it's going to start quickly working up like so. Where good players tend to keep that left wrist a little bit flatter, a little bit longer. That allows them to supinate, and that allows them to keep that ulnar deviation, which gets the bottom of the swing farther forward, a longer arc width kind of in the follow-through position, which helps with consistency of contact. So those are the two major coupled ones, but let's take a look at the last piece, which is pronation supination. Now, pronation supination, if you look at the muscles that actually do it, most of them, with the exception of one pronator, are up here more in the elbow. I mean, your biggest supinator muscles are actually your bicep brachii. There's another supinator muscle, and then you've got your pronators coming kind of one across here and one across there. The supinator muscles are much bigger than the pronator muscles. So trying to rotate your forearm like so is much more powerful than trying to rotate your forearm like this. So what ends up happening is you see kind of two different dominant patterns. You've got guys who get most of their speed from supination of the left wrist, or you've got guys who get most of their speed from flexion of the right wrist. But you rarely see people who are getting most of their speed from pronating that trail wrist. So if you're trying to work on getting a little bit longer rotation, or you're trying to work on getting a little bit more of this left wrist supination in the follow through, I think it's most important to focus on that left wrist doing the movement and not focusing on the trail wrist. So hopefully that doesn't confuse you anymore, and hopefully that clears up a few things. But if you have any questions, feel free to email us at Golf Smart Academy, and we'll do our best to get more videos out there to help you understand how the body is actually swinging the club.